welcome, this is Afshin Ratansi and Yvonne Ridley joining you from on board HMS President in the heart of the English capital.
And the theme is lasting legacies, both good and bad. Today we will remember this man. He gave up his family life and home comforts to set up a peace camp outside the Houses of Parliament.
Politicians from Tony Blair to London Mayor Boris Johnson wanted rid of Brian Hall, but the much-loved anti-war campaigner stood his ground until he succumbed to cancer a few days ago.
And this guest comes on board to defend absent fathers after British Prime Minister David Cameron launched a blistering attack on runaway dads.
A horrific blunder by NATO bombers wiped out a Libyan family, including young children. This journalist, a recent visitor to Tripoli, joins us to give her view on the West's bombing campaign.
Stay tuned to find out what she has to say. All of this and so much more on the show which rocks the boat.
Our first guest joins us to talk about ongoing Islamophobia in Britain, its impact on the community and the solutions.
Raza Nadeem from the pressure and campaign group MPACUK is launching a week of action to combat the abuse suffered by Britain's Muslim communities. But is the situation getting any better or worse?
Raza, there's a worsening economic crisis in this country. How is MPAC UK going to stop growing Islamophobia and, I suppose, worsening economic conditions for white working classes as well in this country?
And definitely, we've seen in history in the past where people, they use other, socioeconomic problems and try to stigmatise a community. And we're seeing that happen with Muslims as well right now. What we're trying to do in MPAC UK is launch a national campaign called Stop Islamophobia Week, which we're doing to coincide with the massacre of the Bosnian men that occurred in July the 11th in 1995. We're just trying to highlight the fact that as a community of Muslims and non-Muslims, we've had enough of the constant attacks against Islam.
Well, what do you think of the coalition government's attempt at trying to change policy? That's what they're saying anyway, aren't they, compared to the Labour
Well, they
Party?
do, but then you have David Cameron going out to a multiculturalism conference in Munich, and then all he does is talk about Islamic extremism and why Muslims need to integrate more. It's not really helping solve the problem. I think if the government can be doing much more, and when you have groups like the English Defence League, walking our streets with no concern of them, being banned, and they can go around, chanting and spreading their hate. There's a problem there.
On the subject of the English Defence League, you had an attack just a few days ago. A gang of about 40 attacked a young Muslim man. In fact, you made a film about it.
Yeah, basically what you've had is that over the last 3-4 months, the English Defence League have been marching almost on a weekly basis in East London, where they're trying to build a new mosque where they've got planning permission from the council. So on a weekly basis, you've got the English Defence League marching. After one of the marches, they're walking past where one of our members was living. He'd just gone out to the local grocery store, and he had 40 men attack him and led to his cheekbone being broken. And now he's in hospital, and he's having to have an operation on his cheekbone. And the worst thing is that this is happening on a weekly basis, and there were no real uniformed policemen from any of the witness statements that we've seen.
How are the police treating this attack? Are they treating it as an Islamophobic assault?
Well, the thing is that we've made sure that it is pushed to understand that it isn't a racial crime. It was a crime of the fact that the person was a Muslim. Some of the chants that were, that were shouted at that person were that "Go home, you Muslim terrorist bombers." So, they weren't talking at the fact that they were Asian or from whatever colour background. It was the fact that that person was a Muslim.
And they're saying "Go home," and yet he was born in this country.
Exactly. Yeah, he's lived his entire life in East London. So, where else can he go?
I'm sure we both had those chants. Just on the Cameron-Clegg government. Are they stupid, or is there something more sinister when it comes to saying attack Muslim groups, attack even the EDL, rather than looking at the causes that produce the EDL and the extremists that are in the Muslim
Well, the thing is that
community?
you have, I think, even from the previous government, what you have is that they're not always looking at the core problem. For even the issue of, let's say, extremism, they refuse to talk about openly the role that unethical foreign policy has to play. So in many cases, you find the government being dishonest to the public. And if they're genuine about solving the problem, then you've got to look at all the problems, every single issue that there is on the table, and be honest and say, how do we counter them? But I think often you find our government isn't always being honest on these issues.
So what's the solution? We hear the government unveiling yet another version of the Prevent scheme.
Exactly, yeah, which is even worse off than what we had under the Labour government, because it says even basically that if any dissent against the government's line of what extremism is, you are an extremist, which doesn't really help solve the problem of extremism.
So who radicalised the Archbishop of Canterbury then?
Exactly. The thing is,
it's about thought crime now.
Yeah, it is. That's the thing. It's gone into the realms of, even if you think that the government may be doing something wrong, or that we're wrong for, supporting an illegal war in Iraq, that you are helping to support extremists.
How did they treat your organisation? Did they expect your organisation to applaud it? Because they seem to be saying, oh, look, we're way better than Labour.
Well, the thing is that they'd expect us to applaud if we wanted their funding, but we don't. So it's, we're not applauding it. We're saying, well, as a Muslim community, this is disgusting. You're not looking at solving the root cause of the problem. We just, more smokes and mirrors to, divert people from the actual...
Well, let's hope that your campaign does have an impact. Thank you very much, Raz and Nadeem.
Thank you.
Who could forget the horrific images shown around the world just a few days ago when a NATO bombing went horribly wrong?
24 hours later, NATO blundered again as Tripoli officials claimed 15 people, including 3 more children, had died in the home of a senior regime official.
Reports coming out of Libya are confused and conflicting, but perhaps our next guest, journalist Viv Ellis, can give us a sense of what's going on.
Viv, welcome to HMS President.
Thank you.
First of all, how was Tripoli? We've seen the horrible pictures of civilians being killed in the past few days.
Oh, Tripoli was a mix. From the point of view of the people, they are utterly charming and very dignified and very friendly towards us, even though we are the people perpetrating these things against them. But they're very confused about, why is NATO doing this to us? What have we done? Why is NATO bombing us? And that was horrible. And there were times when, yes, it was very scary out there.
Do they not see Colonel Gaddafi as the cause of the NATO bombing?
Absolutely not. You couldn't be further from the truth. I never heard... I mean, all right, we were in his half, if you like. We were not allowed to go to the eastern part of the country. I didn't hear one word said against him. If anything, people would say, well, if it's time for a change, it's our business. It is a Libyan issue. Go away and leave us alone. Let us sort it out. But I never heard a word said against Gaddafi, and I would estimate from what I saw and from what the people that we met from all sorts of parts of the country that he's got 80% support.
But of course people are polarised. His enemies say there's a climate of fear, and this is why people daren't stand up and say we want rid of him. It could be argued that they would say that, wouldn't they?
It could be argued, yes.
Where is the truth in all of this? Because we're getting confused reports from the mainstream media as well.
I have never been so ashamed to be a journalist in my life as when I switch on the TV and see what Britain...
There's a kind of sarcasm from mainstream journalists who are based in Tripoli.
There is. I mean, even when you think back to when kind of Gaddafi's son was, Arab al-Shaif was killed, it's like, oh, well, according to the Libyans, this has happened, but we haven't checked it out yet. Well, why would they lie about that? If I were at the BBC now, I would be reading as much as I could, looking online, looking on YouTube, and things do get taken down off YouTube quite quickly over this issue, and then just questioning, even at low level, well, why are we doing this? Why aren't we doing this? I mean, for example, just last week, all the newspapers were reporting that Gaddafi orders his soldiers to rape women. Now, the evidence that we were given over there was that, yes, there is a lot of rape going on, but it was perpetrated by the rebels. Now, who knows? Maybe it's both sides.
But the International Criminal Court was very quick to intervene.
Yes, but not only against one side. Why did we not hear, oh, actually, because I've got loads of testimony taken from women who were raped by the rebels. Why is that never reported? It's so one-sided.
People watching this, as I say, will be polarised. There'll be supporters of Gaddafi cheering you on, but there will be people in Benghazi saying she has no idea what she's talking about.
Listen, I'm not here as a supporter of Gaddafi. I've spent 1 week in Libya. I've not lived there, and so I'm not in a position to say what it's like to live there. I went there completely non-partisan. I'm just telling you what we saw and the evidence that we gathered. So no, I can't say that I am a supporter of Gaddafi, but I am a supporter of people's freedom to determine their own future. You know, Libya is a sovereign country. It is a democracy, actually. People don't realise that. They think he's a dictator. He's not. He gave up being the Prime Minister years ago. You know, there are 2,000 tribes in Libya. We met a lot of the tribal leaders, and they've all signed a constitution. You know,
do you think a lot of people you met were concerned that it might be about energy resources?
Oh, the oil, of course. Yeah. They're not stupid. They know what it's about. The people over that side of the country are going to end up with the oil, and the people over this side of the country won't.
Well, thank you very much for coming on board, Viv, and giving us this perspective.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Well, it seems the government and the trade unions are on course for an unforgettable battle on June the 30th as a day of strike action has been declared.
The political right is predicting the slaying of the trade union dragon once and for all, while the unions reckon the government's obstinacy could lead to a mass revolt of Greek-style proportions.
And of course, the mainstream media has a ringside seat, whipping everyone up into a frenzy, predicting the biggest strike action in 100 years. I stopped by the office of the New Statesman to get a feel of what is really going to happen in the next 48 hours. This is what the magazine's senior editor in the politics department had to say.
I think on June the 30th we're going to see the biggest strike for several years, the biggest strike that Britain has seen for several years. If some of the figures are to believe, something like 750,000 teachers and public sector workers from 4 different unions, 3 teaching unions and the civil service union, the PCS, will stage a mass walkout, which we haven't seen for a very long time, in protest at reforms to public sector pensions and to pay and to jobs.